Part 3. Love Fire Month, 9th month, 4th day 22:27. It had been a fierce battle. The insect maid finally collapsed, like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Evil Eye's mana was heavily depleted, and her expendable items were almost gone. The cost of this battle had been ruinous. We won. Kugane, covered in wounds as she was, announced their victory in a panting voice. While she was completely out of healing items, she had not lost as much health as her external injuries would indicate. Finish her off. Got it. Evil AA approved of Tia's suggestion. The insect maid was on her last legs, but she was not dead yet. The fact that she was still making chirping noises was the best proof of that. Now that she lacked the ability to fight, it would be best to take her life without hesitation. Tia stepped forward, sword in hand, and then her body froze in place. Evil AA knew the reason for that without having to ask her why. I believe that will be all for now. Unbelievably enough, a man had appeared in front of the insect maid at some point to block her. He was dressed in strange clothes which they had never seen before in this region. From what Evil AA knew, this was a type of clothing worn in the south known as a suit. The man wore a mask, and they could not see his face. However, he was most definitely not human. That was because he sprouted a tail from his waist. Oi, you a friend of Evil Eye's? Nonsense, Evil AA wanted to say, but she could not speak. She felt like she had been struck by lightning. She glanced at her right hand and saw that it was covered in sweat. Are you alright? Allow me to take care of things from now on. You should go back and rest. The man did not seem to care at all about the armed and battle-ready members of Blue Rose, but spoke kindly to the insect maid. Though he was an enemy, that act of his seemed quite endearing. However, Evil AA did not think so. The fear she felt from the top of her head to the ends of her toes refused to vanish. Evil Eye's survival instincts responded. She held her breath and desperately whispered to Kugane and Tia beside her. Run away. Idiot, don't look at me. Shut up and listen. He's too powerful. He's a monster among monsters. Don't look back, just run with all your might. What about you? Garen's face was bitter as she asked that question. Don't mind me. Once I've bought enough time for you to flee, I'll escape with teleportation magic. And then, somehow, the insect maid who should have been rendered immobile by her injuries rose shakily to her feet. She did not seem to have used any healing magic, nor did she seem to have drunk anything. An insect flew out of nowhere and clung to her back, and then the maid soared into the night sky. She left only the sound of her going "Gii behind as she flew into the distance. Although their enemy was getting away before their eyes, Evil AA did not care. She could not tear her eyes away from the man in front of her. The other two were like her, covered in sweat and frozen in place. After watching the maid leave, the man turned back to face Evil AA and the others. In the 250-plus years of her life, Evil AA had seen powerful beings of all shapes and sizes. However, the man before them had a unique aura about him. No, it was more that the nauseating malice he emanated had no equal in all her experience. Someone like him ought to be on the level of the Platinum Dragon Lord. He was too powerful for her to make an accurate judgment. I apologize for keeping you waiting. Now then, since we do not have much time for this, let us begin right away. Run. Evil Eye's voice was more of a wail. The two of them turned like they had been electrically shocked. It was not as though they did not feel guilty for leaving their comrade behind. This was best shown by the fact that they did not retreat right away when Evil AA told him to flee. What they felt was trust that Evil AA would find a way to deal with this, or that Evil AA could find a way to escape. However, those thoughts were immediately overruled. For starters, parting right after meeting is most saddening. Therefore, please permit me to interdict your teleportation. Dimensional lock. One ought to say one's farewells before departure. Certainly that would be pleasing from both an emotional and an etiquettical point of view, do you not agree? Certain extremely high-level demons and angels could use skills that could prevent the use of teleportation in their vicinity. Evil had now lost her means of retreat. However, that was not a problem. She had known that from the beginning. The last person to remain here, the one covering everyone else's retreat, would not make it back alive. Death ought to come in the appropriate order. The young should live while the most aged should die first. I believe that is proper. After bidding farewell to the vanishing presences behind her, the woman who had lived over 250 years turned to face the enemy before her eyes, though she had no chance of victory. Now then, after you. Of course, if you will not do anything, then I shall make the first move. Unlike his gentle tone, the explosion of compressed bloodlust was truly terrifying. Evil focused the full extent of her will to disperse the malice before her. I am Evil I am a woman of legend. No matter how powerful my enemy is, I must fight. Then don't mind if I do. Take this. Maximize magic, shard buckshot. Her opening move was her most favored spell. Shards of crystal, each slightly smaller than a fist, scattered forth. The crystal shards had pointed tips, and originally, they should have been fired into her enemy's body at close range to increase their power. However, she dared not approach the fiend before her too closely. She had resigned herself to death, and yet she dared not advance. Evil could not help but mock herself for that. However, she ought to fight carefully when she did not know how powerful her opponent was. The masked demon spread his arms, as though in welcome. The shower of crystal flechettes hit him. No, they vanished before they did. So complete and sudden was the disappearance that it seemed as though they had never existed. Is this the spell resistance which only certain species possess? He's that much more powerful than me. The greater the difference in their power, the more easily spells could be resisted. Ignoring Evil who had misplayed her opening move, the man grandly swept his hand. He looked like the conductor of an invisible orchestra. Hellfire wall. A wave of heat crashed into her back. Evil could not believe it, and hurriedly turned back to look. There was a fume, and then it seemed as though the night itself had caught fire. Unnatural black flames surged into the sky. The fleeing Garion and Tia were enveloped by the black fire. Their limbs twitched like puppets, and then they fell to the ground like so much rubbish. When the fire had vanished like it had never been, the two of them remained motionless. Evil fought the impulse to rush to their side. She could hardly believe it, but she had no choice but to do so. Evil knew those had been fatal injuries. With just a single blow, the comrades with whom she had shared her joy and sorrow had lost their lives. She clenched her teeth to keep herself from screaming. I had hoped to stop just short of killing them, but they were weaker than I had expected. To think they could not even take flames of that magnitude. You have my sincerest condolences. The man bowed, as though his regret was sincere. Evil could no longer hold her feelings back after witnessing his fake attitude. He had ignored Evil before him, the one who had actually attacked him, but had instead attacked the two people behind her. Why was that? Obviously it was because they were fleeing, but there was another, greater reason beyond that. Evil fully understood the disparity in their respective fighting strengths, and she knew that she had not been perceived as a threat. However, the truth was worse than what she had thought. Her opponent did not even see her as an enemy. The person before him would not flee, so he would kill the people who did flee. That was probably what he was thinking. Striking while sparing your lives is hardly an easy task. And I cannot use you as a reference either. Why did you team up with them despite the vast gulf in your respective abilities? If you had not, I might have been able to make a better estimate. You have no right to say that. Owa. This was not a wail of despair, but a cry of anger. Evil Eye's howl was full of hatred as she broke into a sprint. No, it would be better to say she flew on wings of magic. She focused her mana into her fist, preparing a touch spell that would be difficult to nullify or resist. The demon raised his fist and prepared to meet her. Aspect of the devil giant arm of the demon. The demon's arm swelled up to several times its original size, and it was so long that it dragged upon the ground. This was not pneumatic inflation, but a sturdy arm of muscle and bone that was a weapon in its own right. Anyone would take a step back just looking at that weapon. Indeed, Evil Eye had cowered for a moment. But she had resolved herself for this, and she decided to evade the attack of that arm and attack her foe. The gigantic arm closed in on Evil Eye. It moved much faster than she had imagined, filling up her field of vision like a gigantic wall. Evil Eye sensed that she would have a hard time evading, and cast a defense spell. Damage translocation. Her vision turned black, and at the same time she felt a massive impact, as well as her body being savagely hurled through the air. Her line of sight spun round and round, and she had no idea where she was. When she hit the floor, the impact was such that she bounced lightly off, like a ball. Then she hit the ground again, this time, sliding to a halt. However, she was unhurt. Evil Eye used fly to get back up in a way that defied common sense. She was unhurt. However, had she not used a spell which converted physical damage to mana depletion, she would probably be dying by now. Penetrate maximize magic, crystal dagger. She created a crystal dagger that was bigger than usual. This spell caused pure physical damage, which was not easily resisted. In addition, she had used a skill to allow it to breach spell resistance more easily. The demon did not dodge, but took it on his body. The spell's damage potential had been maximized, yet it did not seem to have affected the demon at all. I couldn't hurt him even with a spell enhanced with penetrate magic. This high-level demon is beyond my expectations. No, he might be beyond the demon gods. Could he be the king of the demon gods? Just adding the word Lord to a name did not make a monster stronger, but the more powerful members of a species often called themselves lords or kings. That was common knowledge in this world. Frankly speaking, humans were the only species who would crown their weaker members as kings. Aspect of the devil, scything claws. The demon's fingernails grew to a length of over 80 centimeters long. Evil Eye's instincts told her that they were sharp enough to cut through anything. I can't escape with their bodies. Even if the others came, they'd only get in the way against this guy. At the very least, I need to change the battlefield and make it easier for the other two to find the corpses. Evil Eye quirked up the corner of her mouth. The worst-case scenario would be having Lacus, who possessed resurrection magic, encounter this demon. She had to avoid that at all costs. Here I come. In the moment that Evil Eye was about to challenge him, something fell between them with a thunderous crash. Unable to bear that weight, the stone slabs shattered, and dust flew everywhere. Before her stood a warrior, still kneeling from the force of his landing. His jet-black armor reflected the calm light of the moon, making for an oddly beautiful sight. His crimson cape fluttered like a roaring blaze, with the night sky as a backdrop. Each of his hands held an extraordinary greatsword, gleaming with the light of judgment. The dark warrior slowly rose to his feet. He was truly massive. By height alone, he ought to be about as tall as that demon. However, just like fiends would recoil from holy light, Evil Eye sensed a hint of fear from that powerful demon as he gazed upon that dark warrior. It was as though he had seen something unbelievable. Evil Eye heard the sound of swallowing in the silence. It had come from the demon. That unfathomably powerful demon, whose strength even Evil Eye could not accurately judge, did not dare breathe loudly in the presence of this imposing warrior. She heard a cold voice shatter the night. Now then, which of you is my enemy? End chapter.